So orientation is about this common ground that the coach and the athlete establish together through talking, listening, disclosing information, doing things together, and so on and so forth. And co-orientation is important because essentially helps coaches and athletes conduct themselves with one another at a good level. They know, I know that if I do this, my coach will feel like that, or if I don't say that to my coach, it might deter me from improving.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Labours of Sports Coaching with myself, Mark Carroll. In today's episode, I was delighted to be joined by Professor Sophia Jowett. Sophia is a really prominent name in the coaching and the sports psychology literature for her work, looking at what creates for functional versus dysfunctional coach-athlete relationships, and relationships where relationship satisfaction is high or low, and how that leads to various adaptive and maladaptive outcomes. We often, and certainly for me, it was a real opportunity to consider where there's congruence of thought between the coach athlete relationship and obviously the coach creating motivational environment, insofar as relatedness support. And it's not to say they aren't separate constructs, as Sophia gets into with me as well, but it really offers an opportunity to flesh out, I think, various elements of interpersonal involvement, and also build upon that with other things. And we move through Sophia's 3 Cs+1 framework, very famous framework, and we discuss a lot of the precursors of that, and why certain athletes and coaches have better relationships or closer relationships, or relationships with more complementarity or co-orientation, and all that terminology as explained in the episode. But why is that? And we touch on all the various little elements there around length of relationship, gender, age, level, competence of the coach, and various other aspects, and start to get to the crux of some tangible grapplings with the subject, but also some of some of the paradoxes of thought, and some of the unresolved questions that need further answering. So certainly for a coach who maybe feels they don't know enough about how they can create better quality relationships, it's an episode for you. But also for the coach that I think maybe thinks they've heard enough about relationship quality and think, we kind of get it, we should be good to our athletes. But actually there's more that should be understood in that respect, and more that we need to research on as well. And we just chat about all those things. So really great conversation by like an absolute pioneer in this space. So definitely one to tune into. Again, please subscribe to the show, follow the show wherever you listen to your podcast. Rate it highly, please, and then that helps with the visibility. And bear in mind, if you have been listening to the show for a long while and you feel it's impacted your practice, in the about section of the podcast, you'll see a form that you can fill in just to let me know about that, the way it's impacted your practice. It would be amazing to help me evidence the utility of the show, and also offer an opportunity for you to give input as to maybe how you want me to take the show forward, and some of the features that I have bubbling up beneath the surface. So yeah, without any further delay, let's get into the show. Hope you enjoy it. Hi, Sophia. So welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here. How are you to begin with?
Very good, Mark. Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here with you today and have this conversation around coach-athlete relationships.
Yeah, honestly, I'm so thankful for your time. I've been really excited to chat to you. Obviously, we were just speaking off air, but you're like a bit of a rock star insofar as like how we think about coach-athlete relationship. You've been working in this space for so long, and also you've brought forward a framework that's like, for someone like myself who's a researcher more motivational psychology, and we talk about relatedness, not suggesting this is just a byproduct of that, but it fleshes out so many things and helps us understand more about the importance of various elements of how I think about things, and that STD language, relatedness, but you see it's closeness, connection, orientation, and just all the different ways that it can be mixed in, and all the outcomes. Actually, prior to today, I read a book chapter you wrote, obviously, in the Routledge and International Handbook of Sports Psychology back in 2016, and it was just a great read. Just want to plug that straight away for the people that are listening. But rather than me doing the audio book of that book chapter, maybe we can start by asking you, why should we care about coach-athlete relationship? What has been your motivation for being in this space and investigating this space so deeply for so long?
Well, that's a great question. Where do we start, right? Thank you very much, actually, about the chapter, because I really enjoyed writing that chapter back in 2016. And I think it was with one of my PhDs. Am I right? Was it Vaitheheis and Mugam, I think, that I wrote it with? But it doesn't
Oh,
really matter. So you
yeah.
will forgive me if I've got the name wrong. But in any case, why do I study coach-athlete relationships? What are the motivations behind my interest? I guess it started when I was very young, when I was even an athlete myself. And I had, in the period of about 10 years that I was a competitive athlete, I had three main coaches, although I had, different coaches that came in and out from my career. The three main coaches that I had really made an impression on me. And in fact, the middle coach of those three, the one that I really admire for the approach towards coaching me, has made me sensitive to the impact the relationship can have, from the point of view that he was the only coach out of the three main coaches I had in that period that was interested in me as a human being more than just as an athlete. So we had, great conversations. He was interested about my goals and about my aspirations from within sport, but also outside the realm of sport. And he was the one that actually made a great difference in my performance as well. So I think that was one of the motivations that got me thinking about this interpersonal dynamics between coaches and athletes and the impact they can have on athletes' performance and well-being. In addition to that, when I started clearly showing academic interest in sports psychology and the interpersonal dynamics between coaches and athletes, what I identified by reading the literature, we're talking about 25 years ago, I noted that there was a huge gap, a really massive gap in understanding this phenomenon that we call today relationships, because much of the interpersonal dynamics involved between coaches and athletes were studied via coach leadership, for example, what coaches do to the athlete or to a group of athletes to influence them towards certain goals, individual and team goals. So for me, that was unsatisfactory from the point of view that there was just one direction, the coach's influences on the athlete. And I felt that the athlete had also a role to play in that. They could equally influence coaches' approach, styles, behaviors, input, feedback, and so on. And that put me, right in the right place at the right time to kind of say, right, okay, whilst the coach leadership is a good framework and motivational theories to help us understand the dynamics between coach and athletes, there is so much more. And there is this phenomenon that we call relationship that we haven't really tapped into. And around the time 2000, you will find that there were many other sports psychologists, and I will mention a few names like Paul Wheelman, Arthur Pogatowski, Antonini Felipe, and Verger, and a couple of others who kind of opened the floodgates toward the study of relationships. Or indeed, they said, well, this is an uncharted territory, we need more research. So these are the two motivating factors that kind of made me consider the phenomenon of the coach-athlete relationship as an important phenomenon that we need to study and understand and help, future coaches and athletes
No,
to understand
fantastic.
it as well.
Yeah, I love that it's actually refreshing that the genesis story for that hasn't been that you had a bad coach. It's not often when it's like when people are inspired to do this work, it's like I had a really terrible coach, but I had a really good coach, and that showed you and modelled what good behaviour is. Is there something as well? You obviously got into maybe suggesting around the reciprocal nature of coach-athlete relationships. Is it just one of the things that's always came through heavily in your writing and obviously the work that you've done is that coaches need athletes in the same way that athletes need coaches in order to have a fruitful, like, concurrent experience in sport. And one of the things that how I think you've always impacted the way I've thought about things is, and you actually put this sort of formula in the book chapter as well, is that you almost say relational coaching plus technical coaching is where effectiveness occurs. And I think is that sort of is that almost to push against the mindset where I suppose the relationship's almost, if not a luxury item, it's like we just perceive that it goes along, it just happens, and that coaches should be thinking just about the technical coaching, and that's the gig, that's the job, and that's what ultimately will determine success. Is it the fact that we need both, and is that's what's really the strong salient issue here for your work, is that we need both, and that they support one another. It unlocks the technical coaching. Is that a fair thing to say? It's like it unlocks the ability to do better with the athlete if you know the athlete and work well with them.
I think you're spot on there in the way that you described it. I kind of always thought that the technical ability or the technical knowledge that the coach has is a default. You cannot really coach, train unless you've got the technical knowledge. The relational element will give that edge to the coach, because you can impart all the knowledge that you want, but if you don't connect with that athlete at a much deeper level, I don't think you will maximize that information that you have and hold. But at the same time, I do believe, from the research we have done, from the applied work that I have done, from the many interviews and interactions I have had with coaches and athletes, that at the end of the day, coaches don't have all the knowledge. They don't have a crystal ball, to tell them exactly how, when, what. And the athlete is a huge resource. The athlete has got a great deal of information, knowledge, skills, experience, understanding. They know, if nothing else, they know their body. They know their, mental status so much better than anybody else. And
Mhm.
coaches, for me, will have a lot to gain by tapping into that knowledge and involving, engaging at a much deeper level their athlete in order to get the best out, or to make the most out of the person that they have in front of them. So I just wanted with that equation there that I kind of illustrated, that the technical element is very important, as is the relational element. And sometimes, I think you hinted to that, we forget the relational element and we just expect it to just organically happen. But in many instances, and when the opportunity arises, which you have given me right now, is I do ask both athletes and coaches, specifically coaches because they set the tone, to deliberately and intentionally consider how they build relationships with their athletes, in the
Mm.
same way that they periodize training. I want them to periodize their relationships, because the relationships, you may put a lot of effort in the start of a relationship to get to know your athlete, to understand your athlete. There is a um, huge levels of interaction at the start of a relationship, when a relationship begins, more often than not. And then you just let that relationship, just happen,
Mm.
without any checking points or checking in, with the athlete, what is happening as they move into, the next week, the next month, the next
Mm.
year. So,
Mhm.
and the relationships need to kind of, they need nourishing. Without nourishing,
Mm.
they die.
And I would even also, in terms of adding on to how you've interpreted that, like if we consider going back to what you mentioned around the reciprocal element of it, when we're talking about the richness of what a coach can get out from tapping into the person, they need to earn access to tap into that resource as well, isn't it? And this goes hand in hand with it, because it seems like, if an athlete trusts the environment and the coach is that main actor of what the environment is to them, the athlete opens up, the athlete can tell them about how they are, not just what they do, but when they don't do it and what they do. But that can't necessarily, it doesn't sound anyway when I look at your work that can be demanded. It needs to be earned. It needs to be, that's a partnership, and this is a sort of like, it's a power thing. It's not necessarily to dilute the coach's power, but to recognise where there has to be a shared trust within that dynamic. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. It is very true. I think in order for two people to work together uh, in the best way possible, they need a quality connection, a quality relationship. You mentioned trust, but there is so many, the relationship is a complex thing. It's not just trust that we
Mm.
need to have in a relationship. And certainly trust, yes, connect those people and allows people to work together in much more authentic authentic ways. Um, so I think I missed the point of the
Yeah, no.
question.
So I think it's just to tee up what I think we're getting at. Did you say it's not just about trust? So what you have done is you flesh out these things because, like as you've said, as much as I've given a sort of formulaic approach to it, it's certainly it's not. And I think there's nothing reductionary about this. I think what you do is actually, if anything, you expand the complexity, but at least the simpleness of the task at hand of what you should try to do. But what you go into your work is you present the three C's plus one model where you sort of break down all these various elements of how we can earn that high quality relationship and relationship satisfaction, if I'm using the correct words. So could we maybe take each of these C's at a time and maybe discuss them for coaches that maybe haven't been as familiar with your work, or even those that are, but they want to learn a bit more, and equally for researchers. So the first C is closeness. Maybe that was the most direct one related to trust. What does closeness mean? Why? How is it used? In what way do you like to think about closeness in the coach-athlete relationship?
Sure. Okay. So yes, the closeness is it captures the coaches and athletes' emotional tone, the affective tone of the relationship, and includes such relational properties as trust, as you mentioned, respect, appreciation for one another, and interpersonal liking. So these are the core relational properties of closeness. And in the ways that we see, captures the affective connection that these two people develop, that mutual trust that keeps them together, that mutual respect, appreciation, and liking. And that is closeness. It's very simple. But of course, what I would like to point out here is that often when we talk about relationships, more often than not, we hear people, athletes and coaches refer to trust and respect. But what I would like, through us discussing the 3+1 Cs model, which is a framework that captures the relationship quality, to show that there is complexity, there is multidimensionality, it is a multifaceted phenomenon that we need to encapsulate and understand. It's not as simple as, for example, trust or respect. There are more components to it that make the relationship a good quality relationship.
So I was actually thinking that as you say that, because you could say trust or respect, like they are obviously, they seem pleasing and pleasant, but they seem as abstract if you take it and just as this a semantic level. So like what are these to be interpreted as actions? We communicate these in actions. How do we demonstrate trust? How do we demonstrate, when I think about demonstrating respect, it might be, how I welcome an athlete, how I work with them, how I include them in decisions. It can take on various forms, isn't it? And how it actually manifests in reality.
Sure.
Is that,
Yeah,
yeah?
yeah. Well, there is a lot of research that we have done over the years, particularly the qualitative research that we have done, that kind of flashes out all of these different components, the relational properties. And also a recent book chapter that we have written, I've written it with Luke Felton, another former PhD student of mine. We talk a lot about what trust means, what respect means, and it comes clearly from the empirical evidence that we have had over the years, particularly from qualitative research where we were asking coaches and athletes to tell us exactly, when you say trust, what exactly is it? But just to answer directly your question, trust is about relying on the coach, believing in the coach, and vice versa. These are the basic kind of definitional words that you can ascribe to trust.
It's
Yeah, to
what's
trust,
that?
that's
Yeah,
right.
and it's interesting with that then, Sophia, to a degree then, like, well, we obviously are sort of part of the premise of this conversation is that technical skill coaching isn't everything, but I could see how technical skill coaching and demonstrating competence as a coach is instrumental to gaining trust. Which, so
Absolutely.
you can't be, and this is where it almost throws a bit of a spanner at the works, but well, not a spanner at the works, but to an extent, I always think there's more to coaching than being nice, but being nice is important. but you know, we do need to also display competence in these things, and I think that's starting to get at the fact that you need to. There's more than one way of earning respect. It's not just being a nice person and to demonstrate closeness. You actually also need to earn closeness through being a good technical coach, isn't it? So it's not to deny that
Yeah,
importance.
yeah, and I would probably debate the fact that, being nice actually does anything to the relationship. Being kind, yes, but being nice, I'm not quite sure. And
Oh,
again, it's the
aye, aye,
semantics,
aye.
and what exactly do these words represent? Yeah, but I mean, it's, yes.
It's just interesting when you think about it. And maybe it's a bit fortunate actually that we've started on that one, because that seems, I know that we're about to get into the rest as well, but it does seem like if you don't have closeness, it's going to be quite difficult for the other elements of this working out. This seems like fairly core. Like I could imagine everything's building outwards of this to a degree if you have that trust and respect. So um the next one was complementarity. So what's that referring to? What are the nuances within that?
Sure. So, as we mentioned, closeness captures the interpersonal feelings between coaches and athletes. As we mentioned, trust, respect, appreciation, liking are the core characteristics of it. And then complementarity captures coaches and athletes' interpersonal behaviors, or the cooperative acts of interaction between those two people. So complementarity is a long word. People can remember it as cooperation or collaboration. And examples of behaviors that you will expect coaches and athletes to manifest in training and competitions include being responsive to each other's efforts. So when you see a coach being responsive to their athlete's effort, then that is, contributing to their cooperation. Being receptive to each other's needs. When a coach is open and receptive to what the athlete perhaps needs or wants and prefers, that is an element of cooperation. Um, Being at ease or relaxed, comfortable in each other's presence, again, it's a sign of a cooperative relationship. And being friendly, being approachable, socially approachable, as opposed to being distant, hostile, or cold in each other when these two
Mm-hmm.
people interact. In addition to these complementary behaviors, we also capture the roles that coaches and athletes play,
Mm-hmm.
or assume rather, in this particular relationship that we are talking about. So the coach plays a particular role clearly, and their role is to be able to instruct, to guide, to lead, to provide feedback, all these main characteristics that you expect from the coach to do. And then the athlete, the general role that the athlete plays is to be able to take in the instruction, to be receptive to that instruction, to the feedback, and so on, um, and to be able to respond
Mm-hmm.
to the coach's instructions. So I think complementarity, yeah,
Was
is the roles and also the complementary
yeah.
behaviors.
Well, that when I read that spoke to me a lot, and I think for a lot of coaches listening in, because we always talk about a coachable athletes. So a coach wants athletes who have who understand the roles, and there's a synergy there, because a coachable athlete we all love to work with, one who listens and so on and so forth. However, I would probably imagine less coaches consider what their role should be for what the athlete requires, and I wonder if that's like where there's how we could unlock another aspect of a relationship for coaches between who they coach, if they consider are they meeting the role that their athlete requires of them, not just is an athlete meeting the role they require of them, is it? Because there's probably that
Sure.
part's probably left for the athlete to deal with, rather than the coach actually taking ownership and accountability to that. I wonder, and I don't know if how that resonates, if maybe your experience of working with coaches or athletes. Do we ever find that sometimes it's about the coach telling you what the athlete needs to keep doing more of, and how the athlete needs to be more attuned to this? Or I don't know. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that, because it jumped out to me that I'm coachable, but am I actually
Yeah.
a good person?
As you were speaking, I totally agree with this notion, and arriving or reflecting that what you're hearing from a complementarity point of view, on one side talks to coachable athlete, and on the other side, I will say it speaks to adaptable coach, to a
Mm,
coach who is agile and flexible and adaptable to the situation, but also to the athlete in front of them, but also, meeting the athlete where that athlete is at that moment. So complementarity is about, working with one another. Um, and we'll talk about co-orientation, which is about being aligned and having that common. In fact, we can speak about co-orientation now, if that's all right.
Yeah, but
So,
we see, can mention
yeah,
before we move on to that then, to see you
yeah,
mentioned about the dynamic element and sometimes what where athletes needed now. So it's not just about necessarily, because athletes don't just have a stable profile. They have ups and downs and things that are, moving up and down. So it's also about coaches recognizing how they need to change and put on maybe different faces for what the athlete needs at halftime when they're not doing well versus so it can even be as episodic as that. And is it maybe on the
absolutely.
coach to think, oh, okay, because it's
Yeah,
just, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because you cannot be responsive to athletes' needs, to their needs at that particular, space and time, if you are not adapting to that athlete.
Mm.
And we talked about both coach and athlete being responsive and receptive to one another. So I think complementarity does capture that, and you will be able to see it when you go on the track, for example, or on the field, whether these two people actually behave and act and interact in that way.
No, amazing. Yeah, go on to then co-orientation then. So to be, we were kind of moving on to that fluidly anyways. What are we getting at with that one?
Yeah, co-orientation is simply about the coach and the athlete being aligned and be co-orientated, as the term highlights. And it's about these two people having shared knowledge and understanding. In this particular case, about their relationship. Do we understand our relationship, where it is at this specific point in time? Um, but also, what I'm thinking often is that co-orientation is much bigger than understanding where we are with our relationship. If we understand that our relationship is good, for example, and we agree in that judgment, then it is likely that we'll spill over to other areas, to our training plans, to our training goals, to our performances, where we are going, what is our journey like, and so on and so forth. So co-orientation is about this common ground that the coach and the athlete establish together, and through
Mm.
talking, listening, disclosing information, doing things together, and so on and so forth. And co-orientation is important because essentially helps coaches and athletes conduct themselves with one another at a
Mm.
good at a good level. They know, I know that if I do this, my coach will feel like that, or if I don't say that to my coach, it might deter me from improving. So co-orientation is about common ground, and you will expect, for example, in newly established relationships, this co-orientation to be very small, because the coaches and athletes haven't had the opportunity to get to know one another. They haven't had the opportunity to interact, to exchange ideas, thoughts, and behaviors by working together. And then the common ground on a very established relationship, if that relationship has been nurtured over time, will be much larger. And that is where you want to be, really knowing very well one another. I remember an example, you may have heard of Bo Bowman, who
Oh yeah,
is
yeah.
the coach of Michael Phelps and many other
Mm.
Olympians and Olympic champions. He said in one of his interviews that I really know whether Michael Phelps is in a good state, and we're going to have a good training session by just seeing him walking down the poolside. And it shows you the degree of understanding that this coach has, the degree of deeply knowing the athlete very well by just seeing him walking down the poolside. So
Mm.
that is a reflection of co-orientation from the coach's point of view.
And does that, is it probably very important, I could imagine, within that setup of co-orientation, that both parties need to be consenting to what the goals are? Because if there's a middle ground that the coaches manufactured or forced through, that it's not a true middle ground. Like sometimes I think you see mismatches between coach goals and athlete goals, and maybe it might be where there's an athlete who is truthfully in more of a developmental space, but the coach is maybe focusing too much on results, on outcome goals, or these sorts of things, or just what an athlete's wanting across. And maybe if it's not necessarily, maybe it's not necessarily they want different goals, but just the pacing of how how they achieve them and how they, if in the process get to that. It does probably speak a little bit to that and the dialogue that's required within that. 'Cause I think you're making me think now about the interaction of some of these C's, because now all of a sudden that's about respect, and we go back to closeness and how they just kind of go in and again, because it's complicated, are people. Is it, and the last one we haven't touched on yet is actually about just the stability of this as a long-term endeavour, because that's often, it's probably that where really the, actions speak louder than words, isn't it? It's where this is where really the messy, tough part of any coaching process is at. Is it's like what happens when it's hard, what happens in the dips. It's easy to be nice when it's everything's going well. I just would be curious to know where you've worked with coaches, or when you've in so far as the writing and the research that you've done. Do any one of these of the 3+1 C's, do any one of them have more propensity to falling down? Or do any one of them get tested more than others, I wonder? Or just if that maybe links in with when we're talking about commitment. Is that why it's in
Sure,
the
yeah.
first place? I don't know.
So let me just say, so that we can round up the three
Yeah,
plus one Cs
yeah.
model. We've got commitment, which is the one that we haven't spoken. You alluded to it by talking about stability and the ups and the downs. Commitment is coaches and athletes' intentions to maintain a good quality relationship over time, and we know that the coach and the athlete needs time in order to improve performance. Good performances don't happen overnight, and of course we know that in the journey that the coach and the athlete have ahead of them, there will be ups and downs, there will be twists and turns, there will be obstacles and hard times. Injuries are part of high performance, for example. Burnout, exhaustion, or psychological burnout can be part of that process. And commitment, if it is not high enough, will affect how stable the relationship of these two people is. In fact, I often say that commitment is the glue that keeps coaches and athletes together, particularly during low times when things are not quite going their way, performance slumps, as I said, burnout, injury, personal issues that may happen in either people's lives. We are all humans.
Mhm.
So commitment is very important characteristic, and reflects their intentions for, a future together. I think you were saying something earlier about the four C's, and which one may be more important or less important,
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Um, I will say that according to the research, these C's are these constructs that kind of capture the quality of the relationship, are highly correlated, and
Mm,
therefore they're all very important in telling a part of the relationship quality. If, for example,
mm,
if closeness was low and commitment was high, the relationship will still be not ideal. If
yeah,
complementarity was good and closeness was high but commitment was not good, again there is a missing part, an important part. So I
yeah.
kind of shy away from saying that one C is more important than
No,
the
do
other.
you know what? See, as I'm saying that, that was actually bad of me saying that, because particularly when I consider within my own field, people all just think autonomy is the most important thing, and we don't need to worry about competence and relatedness. But if you don't have confidence, then why would you ever push towards doing something for intrinsic reasons? If you don't have a sense of relationship with people within a social setting, why would you just continue to do it? How does that not impede how it unlocks the input you might want to have? So I completely get that. No, that's a bad question from me. So, but it's great in terms of just how you've communicated the need to consider these things as a whole and to pay attention to each of those things as a whole. What I was quite curious then, now that we've established what each of them are insofar as their individual properties, there's a lot of really intriguing insights that you've gathered through your research as to what are the precursors to having a relationship that's of higher satisfaction than less. And like from some of the stuff that we can speak about, just the length of the relationship, to higher levels of performance having an impact, to even like this gender dyads, and coaches, males work with males or females work with females, and individual versus team sport. Like so many things within that like is antecedents to this that I think are really cool. The one about obviously longer relationship, I don't know if you kind of added, does that maybe play a part with also the higher level performance also being a precursor? As you mentioned about you need to work together not often to actually improve with one another. And I'm thinking back to the beginning of the conversation when we did say that, to a degree, coaching competence is also an important element for gaining respect. Does that start to just, is that where that trends, how it sort of manifests somewhat? Maybe to get into that, I wanted to chat about some of these interesting precursors.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wait, you gave me a lot there. So
I know,
where do I
sorry.
start?
Need to digest
That's
that.
absolutely fine.
Aye.
Okay, I'll just pick a couple, and then you can
Yeah,
guide me
yeah,
through
go
the
for it.
conversation. So yes, absolutely. So we discussed the quality of the relationship. So the quality of the relationship. Between a coach and an athlete is a dynamic, it's a situational, a characteristic that involves two people. And then you've got a number of factors outside the relationship quality that are likely to affect how good that relationship is, because it doesn't operate in isolation. So you've got coaches and athletes, for example, as you said, individual difference characteristics that can play a role in how good that relationship becomes. You've got personality characteristics, for example, as you mentioned, age, gender, the level of performance and experience and maturity of the athlete. So there are so many characteristics, the type of sport and so on, that play a role. What we know from research is, for example, that in individual sports, versus team sports, a coach and an athlete are more likely to develop a much stronger, more interdependent quality relationship. So higher levels of closeness, commitment, and complementarity than coaches and athletes who operate in team sports. And that research we did it many years ago. We'll be interested to go back and
Mm,
actually repeat it because times change, and this
mm,
information that we discussed today has been here for a little while. So coaches perhaps are a little bit more averse and a little bit more, they may apply all that knowledge today into their practices. And what was interesting, we concluded, I remember in that paper that the coaches in team sports can take a leaf out from the coaches who operate in individual sports, because what we
mm,
also found is that coaches in individual sports have got not only good quality relationships, high levels of the three C's, but also more satisfied athletes. And we start talking now about well-being, because the coach-athlete relationship is a performance factor. Nobody can dispute that, and we've got plenty of research that indicates that relationship quality predicts quality. Quality relationships predict performance, but also we've got very strong evidence to indicate that good quality relationships predict athlete and coach well-being.
mm.
So maybe we can pick up that a little later, but
Could we,
we also have.
could we,
Oh,
Sophia, sorry, just while it's on there,
yeah,
right? Do you mind if I interject? Could I, if I was to play devil's advocate with that right now, because being a coach myself, right, it's obviously that we've all come up against this where more athletes, you only have so much bandwidth and how you can manage these things and how you can create that interpersonal closeness. Just I do wonder, one of the things I think that leads to burnout in coaches is that we try to be everything to everyone. And how many times do you get coaches that, they try to have that level of closeness with their Texan athletes, senior athletes, whatever, at 11 o'clock at night. And I do wonder if, is it something, I think there's going to be genuine cases where coaches can do more and they can learn from individual sports, but could it also be that if we're maybe come back to like complementarity and understanding what the opposing, what the roles each other has to do from athlete to coach, could the coach's job, or if it's not, because I don't think we can assume athletes to do this, but I think, do athletes in team sports need to recognise, and maybe the coach could help them recognising that there is only so much that a coach can give interpersonally to some extent, and we need to, and I don't know if that necessarily fits as a problem, but I do wonder about how coaches take these messages on about doing more and on giving more of themselves, because I think you do get a lot of coaches that are doing that. But
yeah,
what just, there's a tension there, isn't there? Like, I think that's quite hard, because I think you get a lot of coaches that burn out for that reason. But
sure,
it's
sure,
just,
yeah.
maybe it's just a reality of team sports just being
Yeah,
tough.
yeah, I hear
It's
what you're saying, and you are, yeah, you are right. The relationships will take a lot of time, effort, energy, a lot of investment on the part of the coach. It does. It will take all of that. But at the same time, I'm thinking that actually we can also see it from the other point of view, that it doesn't take too much, too
uh,
long to
mm,
create, an atmosphere that is quite relational, a little pat on the back,
small
high
things.
five, maybe, before training, before the start of the training, face an athlete and say, how has your day been? How has school been? How's your parent? At the end of the training, how was training for you today? How is your injury? How is rehabilitation? Or don't forget to go to sleep early, or something like that, to show interest, or you know all of these things that perhaps take a little less.
So
But
true. Yeah.
yeah, I've also have to say that because we talk about relationships, we must not forget that we are talking about a two-person relationship. So coaches must interact with each one athlete in the team on an individual basis for the relationship to be developed. If a coach decides that most of interactions take place at a collective level, or small group level, or big group level, relationships are not going to be as powerful and as impactful. The other thing I will say that you have prompted me, Mark, is that as we educate coaches, and a lot of coaches will hear this webinar and will take a lot of information for themselves, we need also to educate our athletes, because when we talk about relationships, we talk about two individuals. And I use the metaphor, it takes two to tango. And it is very true. Athletes have got a big role to play in developing their relationship, in building relationships with their coaches. And we just need to teach them that the value of the relationship, the role of the relationship, and coaches create the environment where the athletes can also pull their weight toward that relationship, which is easier for them because they have one coach. As you said, coaches have got maybe 20, 30 athletes in team sports. So if we can just help athletes understand
Yeah.
the role and the value of the relationship, and coaches allow the environment for them, for the athletes to open up and ask questions, be curious, engage with the coach at a different level than before, then perhaps that can help
Yeah,
coaches.
I appreciate that response. Just, when you say that, there is still stuff that we can do that doesn't actually take a lot of energy. Like, just I mean, simple things like, let's say it's match day or it's training. Just stand at the door when they're coming in. Just say hello. Just show that you're acknowledging them. I mean, something that's helped me a lot, and for coaches that are listening, even just take a note of like who you're interacting with in each session, like even during the session, because it just showing interpersonal involvement can be at a sports technical level as well. Like, it can just be caring enough to give impact and feedback towards what they're doing. So even just take a note, I think, of like who have you spoke to, how many conversations you had this session. So next session, make sure you capture the people. So there is, isn't it? It's like we could be fair on coaches, but also there's a need for us to consider what we can still do. I think that's the issue, isn't it? We go too much to just going, all right, we need to abandon all hope for this, and we just don't do anything, and we're closed up. And I think that's so true. Building on top of that as well, I think you'd mentioned around, and part of the reading that I've done, there's a key term that you use, and it's about empathetic accuracy. Now, from my understanding of that, at least I took it to mean about how the longer we get to know someone, or the better, maybe the closer we feel to them, for a lot of different variables, and it helps us understand them. Is that because it just helps us then get to know them? Is that what empathetic accuracy is? Is it just so like that? Is that something that is a feature within this framework, or is it something that's just a practical tool, or a mechanism that you feel is just came out of the work that you've done? How big a role is that empathetic accuracy? It's not a term I think a lot of coaches know about.
Sure.
I'd be quite curious to know.
Yeah, empathic accuracy is a little bit different, and although related, it probably, if you can imagine it, kind of stands outside the framework that we discussed, the 3+1 Cs. Empathic accuracy is something that it might be a product of good quality relationships, and it speaks to how accurately coaches, athletes understand their each other moment to moment. So if you are in a training situation and you see an athlete performing, but performing in the ways that perhaps you didn't expect, you may start making a judgment or evaluation why the execution of the skill was the way it was without asking the athlete. And if you were to ask the athlete, your judgment could be very accurate, because the athlete gave you an answer why the skill was executed in the way it was done. Empathic accuracy is probably product of relationship quality. It is part of a series of research we conducted maybe in 2010, 2015, with one of my PhD students who are now is an academic in Scotland.
Eh?
Yeah, Dundee University. He's still there, I believe. So
Great.
yeah, very good, very good research. But as I said, perhaps related, but sits
Yeah.
outside, and it's different from a concept we use within co-orientation, and we call it empathic understanding. It's slightly different. Empathic accuracy refers and captures the moment-to-moment mutual understanding or understanding of the person we are related to, whereas empathic understanding is the mutual ground, the mutual understanding that we have developed over time that helps us
Okay.
interact effectively.
So maybe that's a nice segue. The next thing I wanted to discuss, because obviously we're now seeing how the coach-athlete relationship in your framework, about how it proves itself in its own merit, but also about how it folds into other sort of known frameworks. And obviously my sort of area, self-determination theory, I always think all the time, without in a sort of reductory sense, considering relatedness as just being a, as just being as an umbrella catch point, I suppose we might call it that. We need relatedness to sort of unlock an athlete's capacity to take ownership of their development, and to then, as a result of that, you know, develop more self-determined forms of motivation. And your work has actually, I think, found that there has been links between with sort of like need satisfaction to playing as a mediator of the relationship between the coach athlete relationship satisfaction and intrinsic motivation, because I think to a degree it's like if an athlete knows their coach is committed to them, they know that there's closeness and trust and respect, they can kind of get on with trying to be better and not worry about other things that might control their motivation. And I think that was actually a link that was found in a paper back in 2010, to be fair, but nonetheless quite important. Whereas the opposite pathology there is also true, insofar as the absence of commitment or the absence of closeness, or lacking that openness, that it leads to more controlled regulatory pathways. There was actually, I was reading that, and that mediation effect works both ways. There was a recent paper, who was it I read by? Freire and colleagues, this was just this year, they actually found that autonomous supportive coaching led to more lifestyle development, with the coach-athlete relationship acting as a mediator within that. So that it works both ways, which I just think is really cool. I don't know if your own work has continued to incorporate self-determination theory much, or if it's just something that, have we found out enough about, or is it we leaving it? I just wonder what's your thoughts around some of that as well, because I think that's another thing that's just worth bringing into the conversation, because motivation's all I think about as well. So I'm just
Yeah, absolutely.
push it
Yeah,
in
no,
there too.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. No, I can see the connections between relationship quality and basic need satisfaction. Clearly, that there are connections there. Um, the only thing I would say, and there is plenty of research, like you highlighted. We've done a lot of research in our laboratory, looking at the basic need satisfaction as a mediator between relationship quality and outcomes, and that works well. And now you mentioned that new research that shows it the other way around, whereby needs predict relationship quality and so on. This is interesting, and that's why perhaps we need now more experimental research, more longitudinal research, just to see the cause and effect. What we've got there, which one is predicting what. Or causing what, more accurately. I would say I've written recently a review paper whereby, and I don't know what your views are, but I wouldn't like us to confuse relatedness, which is one of the basic psychological needs, with relationship quality. Clearly, they are, operationally, conceptually different, and they're measured very differently.
Yeah.
So I need us to make sure that we understand that relationship quality is a very different construct from relatedness, and we cannot use relatedness in order to assume that we are measuring relationship quality, or vice versa. And the other thing I will say, which is very interesting,
Is that in
is that
Sophia, could I ask, is that in an academic light? But if I'm a coach listening to this, practically speaking, do we need to differentiate them? So, like,
practically
imagine, so
speaking,
the lay person, I just wonder that, 'cause it's a slightly different question.
No. From a practical point of view, I don't think there is a need for differentiation, not at all. In fact, from a practical point of view, what we know is that if coaches aim to fulfill the need for relatedness, then it is very likely that we'll have good quality relationships. Or if the coaches target the development, the building of good quality relationships, are very likely to satisfy the relatedness need of the athlete, which is, in whichever way you look at it, is good. In the same way, from a practical point of view, if we talk about behaviors, what we know is that autonomy supportive behavior, so coaches who support choice and so on and so forth, then are more likely to develop better relationships with their coaches. So autonomy supported behaviors are very, very good for coaches to know and understand and use them often in their training sessions, during competitions, because we know will have an impact on relationship quality. Whereas controlling type of behaviors, the type of, intimidation and punishment and so on, will have probably either no effect, because that's what we are what we have found in our research, or negative effect.
I was going to ask you about that, right? So see, around controlling coaching, obviously I'm conscious, but in the research chapter, there's been a wee bit of time, obviously, that's lapsed from 2016, but I noticed that there was some work. It might have been yourself, Sophia, directly, or another colleague, around looking at the impact of controlling coaching on coach-athlete relationship satisfaction, and it didn't seem like there was a damaging impact, because provided the role complementarity was such that that was an expected role that the coach assigns, that seemed to actually buffer that is that maybe a product of contracting? That it's like, I can respect your autonomy by asking, do you feel this is, or at least as long as there's an assumption that the roles are as they should be. Me then taking the lead as a coach isn't necessarily as damaging as when there is a question about whether or not I've earned the right to take that lead as such. I've just wondered, have we got to more clarity in the lapse in time since 2016 there? Or is that just one of these fuzzy ones because people are complicated? This is set up to say, look, even a research paper is telling us one thing here, but that's bounded in context, and it's not necessarily going to be able to speak to every situation. Can I ask you about that? Just, I was curious for own learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I don't know if there are any other research papers, but we found exactly what you mentioned, that controlling behaviors don't have a significant link or impact on relationship quality. Although the association, the path from controlling behaviors to relationship quality seem to be negative, but not significant. And the way that we discuss it in that paper is, what might be happening is that it doesn't affect relationship quality, because controlling behaviors are normalized. So athletes believe that this is part of how coaching is supposed to be done to them. But of course, we know that controlling behaviors, particularly over time, can impact motivation. And therefore, it's something that, and we haven't done longitudinal study, in our work, to kind of see the effects of controlling behavior on relationship quality. But I will suspect that over time, it will affect negatively the relationship quality,
Well,
as it does with motivation.
Yeah, I mean, there is actually some work. Actually, there's a guest that I've recently interviewed as well on the show, Elisa Lefevre, them doing some work on the whether or not a relationship that's high in relatedness and control, does the heightened relatedness actually exacerbate feelings of control? And I think it actually came down to how the athlete coped with it, and if they agreed with it and they agreed that that's just the role of the coach, that that I don't think it necessarily it didn't stop it having a negative effect, but certainly the relatedness the effect was exacerbated by feeling close. So it does show how, like, you know, we need to still consider how these variables of closeness, how they're used alongside other dynamics within a relationship too, that it can
Sure.
actually, you know, they can combine in strange ways. But it shows there is a wee bit of traction in that space, but I think that's been a long time coming. And it seems like that's something we need to just keep delving into. I know that's not necessarily related to this conversation, but just it came to my mind. What I want to know, I'm conscious, what just tells you how we wrap up. What do we still need to find out more about? Because what if I'm the coach or maybe the researcher that's going, do you know what? Sophia's amazing research has showed this importance for so long. We kind of get it now. We need to be good to our athletes and close and controlled, and we need to, you know, think about confident. What do we still need to know more about, both academically, that you think's the main target, the main priorities, but maybe practically as well? If I could maybe nudge you to think about that too, Sophia.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's so much more we can still do. There is so much research that we can do with the 3+1 Cs and other configurations that we have out there to understand the complex interpersonal dynamics between coaches and athletes. But from a relationship quality point of view, I think where we are now, and what I have highlighted in a review that I recently wrote, is that perhaps we need to just put the 3 Cs under the microscope. And I think, again, you alluded, okay, let's look at closeness a little bit closer. Let's put on the magnifying glass and look at closeness very closely, commitment very closely, and complementarity, because often, and in the majority of the research that has been done across the world, the 3 Cs usually are being integrated and merged into one super,
Mm,
construct factor, which we call relationship quality. But I think we need to look at the 3 Cs a little bit closer. And what has prompted me to that is research that you referred earlier, but also some research we have done. We have seen that, for example, closeness, which is something very positive. It's all good to have trust, respect, appreciation, and liking for one another, but it does link actually positively with some negative constructs like fear of failure. And another
mm,
research more recently, not from our lab, but from outside here in the UK, another research team found that commitment is positively linked to stress and threat and coping. So I think there are the questions that we need to ask now is why, and is it personality characteristics that may moderate and impact those links that we find? Is it gender? Is it age? Is it experience? Is it the
mhm,
environment within which these individuals operate? Performance versus grassroots versus talent pathway. So there is so much more work we need to do. In addition to that, we need more experimental work. We need more interventional work. I mean, coaches are very interested to find out, okay, what training do I need to do? What skills do I need to develop in order to be able to deliver good relational environments whereby my athletes feel they belong, that I feel connected with them, they feel connected to me, and so on and so forth. It
mm.
is quite endless, Mark, the work
Yeah,
that we
I
need to
know.
do. So yeah, let's keep doing it.
I know, I completely agree. Particularly, I think in the intervention side too, because I think there's something to be asked there around not just telling coaches what they should do, but helping them understand more about maybe why they don't do what they should do. Because I think coaches know quite a lot about what they should do, but nonetheless, they need to change something within themselves, or they need to change something within their environment to allow their behaviours to come through as well. There's so much there. So, no, Sophia, honestly, thanks so much. I'm conscious, obviously, of your time, but thank you so much. It's been really eye opening just getting an opportunity to chat to you about this. I mean, your work is like, I must just say, and I don't speak on behalf of the academic community within coaching, but it's so prominent in a lot of the ways in which we think about coaching athlete relationship, and I think it's such an important yet strangely overlooked thing, because we still, I think, even though we all know it's important, we still, I don't think, put enough effort into really doubling down on the relationship thing. I think we're still sidetracked by too much technical sport specific coaching, and I don't know why that's the case. And there's just relentless evidence to tell us that this matters. But we need to keep shouting about it. So yeah, unless there's anything we haven't covered already, Sophia, I think we can wrap it up there. Which is great. No, so thank you. And for those that are listening, I hope this conversation has been even a tenth as interesting and as helpful to you as it certainly has been for me. So thank you, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.